The Talking Point with Kathy Motlatlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
We continue the conversation on The Talking Point, and we're going to focus now on reflecting on on partnerships for land reform, and these are partnerships between communities and private entities. Peter Setou is the Chief Executive of the Vumelana Advisory Fund, and he joins us for the conversation this morning. Peter, good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Katie, and good morning to your listeners.
Of course, this becomes an interesting conversation because when we talk about the process of land reform in this country, it has been bedeviled by multiple challenges. Just from the onset of perhaps people being able to have access to certain land, and then there's the question of what happens to those that opt for the land, and some of course choose the monetary payouts, but how do we ensure that whatever land has been put in the hands of communities is actually productive and is able to bring some kind of sustainability and livelihood to communities? Let's talk about the work that you as Vumelana have been doing in this space.
Thank you very much, Katie. But just to begin with, one needs to put things into perspective. Since the advent of democracy, in excess of 8 million hectares of land has been transferred to beneficiaries of land reform. While there are some pockets of success, a great number, in fact, majority of these farms actually remain unproductive, which poses a threat to agricultural production. And it has also meant that people lost jobs in some of the restored land parcels. Now, failure in land reform is due to a variety of factors, chief amongst which is really inadequate support to beneficiaries once they receive the land, and in particular, lack of access to finance and markets. Now, community-private partnerships really are a means through which we can intervene and make sure that land reform can work better for communities. It is imperative that this partnership between beneficiaries of land reform and the private sector form the cornerstone of any successful land reform project. If in a community-private partnership, typically the beneficiary brings their land and labor, while the private sector brings capital, skills, as well as access to markets to the partnership. Now, partnership with the private sector that has the skills and access to market and finance is the most immediate way through which we can address this challenge, because we are aware that government is actually beset with dealing with a whole host of challenges. There's a huge demand on the fiscus. COVID has just demonstrated to us that this pot is not enough to cater for all the social ills and all the social challenges that we've got as a country. So partnership for us really is an immediate way through which we can address this.
Peter, I want to go back just to some of the figures that you have spoken about. You talk about how 8 million hectares worth of land have been redistributed. Do we have, credible figures on how much of this land was actually productive?
Well, and that's part of the problem, Katie. I think we need to make sure that we improve on, firstly, the design of these programs and interventions, so that we can do proper monitoring and evaluation to enhance a better understanding, including the lessons that are required to really improve on these programs. So currently, there's an estimate that anything between 60 and 70% of some of these projects are actually unproductive as we speak. Now, we don't have any credible research at hand to actually back some of these figures. But by any stretch of imagination, any failure in land reform is a reason for us to actually be worried, because it means people have lost jobs. It means people cannot place a plate of food on the table. It means really this process, which was meant to improve on the lives of our people, is not achieving its intended purpose.
Of course, the impact of it is quite devastating. I think, it would be good for us to be able to look comparatively at what the state of some of this land was, including, whether it's farms for agricultural processes, etc. It would be interesting to know what state it was found in versus the state that it's currently in, and some of the estimates that you're working off, so that we're able to clearly identify what are the things in the system in terms of the processes of these transfers, what communities or even individuals do when they're able to access this land that leads to the failures.
You're quite correct, Kathy. It is important for us to do monitoring and evaluation so that we get a better sense, as I've said. But in many instances, and our experience as Vumelana has been that because of poor or lack of effective post-settlement support, including the lack of key ingredients that are really required to run restored farms successfully, that's why we are having this magnitude of failure. And our experience has actually shown that partnerships with the private sector has got multiple benefits. Firstly, they help to plug the skills gap and improve commercial viability of the business enterprises. Secondly, they improve the agricultural output and provide the beneficiary communities with a sustainable source of revenue. And lastly, they help to develop the rural economy and foster food security. Now, if you look at some of the projects that we've supported since 2012, we have to date facilitated just over 23 partnerships between land reform beneficiary communities and the private sector. By so doing, we have put approximately in excess of 70,000 hectares of land to productive use, as a result of these deals that we've negotiated, and thus benefiting in excess of 20 beneficiaries. If you look in terms of investment amount, we are looking at well over 800 million that has been mobilized by way of private investment. So, and if you look at further projects that we are currently supporting, which once concluded would attract in excess of 1 billion rand in investment. So if you look at the scale, it may look like a drop in an ocean. However, if we were to replicate this and if we were to just get a lot of buy-in, particularly from key players, especially government, we think we can really make a dent and achieve some of the targets that have been set out in the NDP.
So, Peter, in terms of the models that an organization like yourselves follows when facilitating these processes, what do the partnerships entail, and are they, what are some of the concessions that are made as part of these contracts? Because often, communities would want to retain 100% control over the land on which work is being done. So talk to us a little bit about, what's in it for the private sector in the long run in terms of investing in these projects.
Well, as I've indicated earlier on, at a point when government actually gives the land back to our people, they've got the land, they've got labor, i.e. people are around, there are people out there who can actually work the land. But the challenge is they don't always have capital to turn around those farms, to work the land. They don't always have the requisite skills to actually work the land. Even if they were to work the land, access to markets, we know that it's a challenge, because for the markets to be able to have access to the market, there are certain prescripts that one really has got to be. Now, bringing these private parties who've got the requisite skills would actually help. It becomes a win-win situation for the community as well as the private investors. If you like, these partnerships actually provide a bridge to the future, because otherwise one would have expected government to fund everything. Now we know that government cannot fund everything. Unless we do things differently, we will continue to see what is happening on the ground. But one of the most important things or lessons that we've learned in facilitating these partnerships is that you need independent transaction advisors in the mix. You cannot leave communities on their own to negotiate with the private investors. Private investors can afford specialists, they can afford people who can really assist them. That is why you need independent transaction advisors who are specialized, who can actually make sure that these contracts and partnerships are based on commercially sustainable activities. The issue that you've just mentioned around risk, I mean, it's one thing to say a community must get 50% or even 100%, but in reality, what does that mean? You know that in business, if you take 50% or even 100%, it means even the risk needs to be carefully allocated. I think it's grossly unfair to allocate the risk to communities under circumstances where they do not understand those risks and are not capable to deal with those risks. And most importantly, the benefits must be clearly defined to avoid any future, infightings or fights with or amongst the community itself or with this investor. The agreements have got to be legally secure. There is no one size fits all. It would depend from one project to the next. In some of the projects, you would actually have a long-term lease where the community would be getting lease fees and they will also be getting equity in the business. But as I've said, it's not a one size fits all. And it's for that reason that you need independent transaction advisors who stand to benefit nothing from this agreement.
So Peter, if I'm understanding you correctly, then the funding and the support that you're talking about, does it come in the form of loans? Does it come in the form of concessionary grants? Is it, are there hybrid funding models? Just to give me a better picture of what you have worked with over the last 10 years that you've been operating in this space.
Yeah. What really happens is, as I've said, it's not a one-size-fits-all. Typically, when the investor come on board, it will be the responsibility of the investor to mobilize finance from the formal financial sector players. So for the community, all that the community would be bringing into the equation would be the land, as it were. I mean, I can give you some of the examples of the partnerships that we've actually supported. An example would be one CPA in the Limpopo area, where the community, working together with the private sector, have been able to create employment for communities through the land acquired through the land reform project. Another one is the Ebenezer CPA partnerships with one specific investor group. This is one of the large land claims to be settled in South Africa, where approximately in excess of 18,000 hectares of land near Vredendal in the Western Cape was actually restored. This partnership has opened export opportunities for the local community, creating employment opportunities for the members and a source of income for the beneficiaries. Through this partnership, they've secured a deal, as an example, to export pumpkins to the Netherlands market, something that they would not have had. And I mean, if you were to leave them on their own, they would not be able to access this market. I'm just demonstrating some of the examples.
All right,
and the
Peter,
partnership has also enabled the community to produce cash crops.
Yeah, Peter, I'm going to pause you there. Unfortunately, we're quickly running out of time for this conversation. I'd also like to get some callers in to be part of it. I'm also going to ask our callers, please, if you can try and keep it as short for me as possible. Simon, you're calling us from KZN. Good morning.
Good morning, Katie. Good morning, Katie. I would like to add an input on this land issue. I want to ask the same guy, which land that government brought and give it to people and at the end lying fellow? Why they don't advertise each and every day? There is a land in a certain area. We need people who got tractors who can work the land. Why they don't create a database where we can register those people who got tractors? They put everything under the carpet, Katie. At the end, they said the land is lying fellow. Which area where the land is lying? Why they don't keep on advertising each and every day? We need so many people that they can work the land. We got students who are well educated on agriculture, but they are sitting at home. And plus that NYDA does not help anyone.
All right, Simon.
They don't get fund. Thank you. Thank you,
right.
Kathy.
Thanks for calling in. Mzi in Eastern Cape, good morning. Hello, Mzi.
As I speak, I'm a small-scale farmer. We are struggling, my sister. I mean, for 3 years, I've been asking them, my local officer, to provide the tractor. The tractors are there, 5 of them, to fix them in paddy. They cannot do that. The simplest job. I've done this to fence this land, put water in my pocket. Now I'm struggling with a tractor. Not buying a new tractor. The tractors are there. It took them, I don't know, this is the 3rd year, to fix one tractor and give to me. We talk about the land. Go to Kwanzambe, go to Kwapikoli, go to Kandwayana, go to Eglemo. Those schemes during the time of service were working. They are not working because we don't have finance. But fortunately for me, I've got 10 hectares, but I'm struggling.
And Mzi, tell me, have you considered a private partnership where you bring in private investors? Have you tried to source that kind of support?
We've been doing that even yesterday. Fortunate for us, there are kids around us. They are looking for, but they don't want to invest their money into us. Even yesterday, we are trying to pull them to come, but they are reluctant to do that.
And what reason are they giving?
Politics, one of them.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, Mzi. Thanks for calling in and sharing that experience. Cyril in Kokstad, good morning.
Good morning, Kathy. First of all, we must appreciate under the Minister talking these are all these projects he's coming up. When I listen properly to this year, this is partnership between communities and private. Private, I would take then, it will be farmers that are established already that know and know how to work the land. And perhaps also will be going to be a great help from the financial side because communities find it very hard to get to the banks to get loans. That we appreciate. Now comes the agreement, the partnership agreement, that who's going to draw that up? Is government going to be part of the drawing up? That's one question. But also we need, Kathy, because government has done an audit on land already, so that we can get the area of these dormant land and arable land and see which are the lands that this partnership will go in. Lastly, when these agreements are getting signed, what about the outstanding restoration land claims? Because when that hits, what happens then? That we can't run away. What language must I ask? Because we need somebody to answer that. There's a Restitution Act that's outstanding, that's there. There's land claims of understanding, and you know what I'm talking about. And I appreciate we had a Takatadiza on the radio that she says she's coming to Coxted. We might, I would appreciate if Radio SAFM will attend this meeting with Takatadiza.
All right.
But those questions stand there. Can somebody answer them?
All right, Cyril. Thanks for those questions. Peter, I'll give you a chance just to respond to what you can, and if you can keep it as brief for me as possible, please.
All right. Thanks, Kathy. There was a question which was raised about where are these areas of land that's available so that people can take advantage of. And I think one needs to highlight the fact that there's a difference between restitution and distribution. These are two different programs. As Vumelana, we tend to largely focus on restitution, which really entails looking at people who have been dispossessed, who are claiming their land back. Now, in terms of redistribution, obviously this is a government function. There are those processes. However, there are challenges which only government can actually address. And I must say, we share the frustration that the caller has actually raised. However, this is not an area that we are really working on per se. However, to the extent that we can help with fostering partnerships, we are more than available to actually assist if possible. The second question related to broadly access to finance. Access to finance is a broader issue for the South, for us as South Africans, particularly for land reform. We need to work together as all stakeholders to make sure that we can develop innovative ways of actually accessing finance. And we are saying building these partnerships is the immediate way whilst we are dealing with the broader issues.
All right. Let me thank you so much for your time this morning, Peter Setou, who is the Chief Executive of the Vumelana Advisory Fund. And certainly, there's been some success in these I don't know if I can call them public-private partnerships, because they're not really partnerships between the state, but partnerships with communities and the private sector that have yielded positive results. And certainly there are these challenges of accessing finances. But what Peter said there is very important, that people must fully know and fully understand the nature of the contracts that they're entering into, the nature of the concessions that are being made, because often that is what creates difficulties going into the future. We'll leave it there for that particular conversation. And up next, we're going to be in conversation with Dr. Stavros Nicolaou, who is the chair